can see it. You can see it. There it is.
What happened here?
He got bit, I think.
Evander Holyfield, look out, he's pushed right here.
For years, this fight was remembered through one image: Mike Tyson leaning in and biting Evander Holyfield's ear. To casual fans, that image became the whole story. Tyson was the man who lost control. Tyson was the heavyweight champion who could not accept defeat. Tyson was the fighter who damaged his own legacy in one of the ugliest moments boxing had ever seen. But the deeper you go into Tyson versus Holyfield, the more complicated the story becomes. This was not just a wild act that appeared from nowhere. It was the final explosion of a rivalry built on pain, frustration, accusations, money, pressure, and one question Tyson carried into the rematch: if the referee will not protect me, what am I supposed to do? That does not excuse what Tyson did. Biting an opponent is illegal, dangerous, and indefensible inside a professional boxing ring. But to understand why it happened, you have to understand what came before it. The first fight, the head clashes, the complaints, the cut, the feeling that his complaints were being ignored, and the psychological trap that pushed Tyson closer and closer to the edge. So, was the bite fight simply the night Mike Tyson lost his mind? Or was it the ugliest possible response from a fighter who believed he had been pushed, fouled, and abandoned by the rules? Before we go deeper, make sure to subscribe to Fight Epoch. We break down the fights behind the headlines, the tactics, the controversies, the turning points, and the moments that changed combat sports forever. This is one of the darkest chapters in heavyweight boxing history, a rematch loaded with money, hatred, fear, and global attention. The Las Vegas stage was supposed to give the world a violent but legitimate heavyweight classic. Instead, it became something more primitive, more chaotic, and more unforgettable. Mike Tyson was still one of the most feared names in boxing. His peekaboo pressure, explosive head movement, short hooks, and crushing uppercuts had made him the symbol of heavyweight destruction. But in the Holyfield rematch, Tyson reached a point where he abandoned the very weapons that made him famous and broke the basic code of the sport. And the key to the whole story is the weapon Tyson believed Holyfield had been using against him all along: the head. The bitterness began 7 months earlier. In November of 1996, Tyson and Holyfield met for the first time. Before the fight, many people expected Tyson to win. He was younger, more explosive, and still carried the reputation of a man whose power could erase opponents in seconds. Holyfield was respected, but he was also seen by many as damaged goods, a great fighter past his physical peak. Then the fight began, and the prediction collapsed. Holyfield did not give Tyson the clean punching battle he wanted. He smothered him, he stepped in, he tied him up, he leaned on him. He took away punching space, broke Tyson's rhythm, and forced him to fight at a range where his short, explosive combinations could not flow freely. This was not pretty boxing, but it was experienced heavyweight boxing. Holyfield knew he could not simply stand in front of Tyson and trade power shots. He needed to disrupt him, crowd him, push him backward, and force him to reset again and again. And then came the clashes of heads.
No intimidation foul. Swing and a miss by Tyson.
He can't fight inside with Mike. Fighting the fight. What kind of competitor he is. This fight, he's made it a championship fight, and Tyson's not overwhelming. The middle from on the inside. He's not getting. He's initiating it. He's getting 2 or 3 punches, and he's tying him up. Ooh.
Holyfield coming on. A right uppercut. Counter punch combination.
It is not letting Tyson do any of the bullying. He's doing.
We'll see if it bears true.
This power stuff that he's like a champion, like the overachieving warrior that he is.
Oh, down goes Tyson! A left hook!
During the first fight, Tyson was cut near the eye after a head clash that the referee judged accidental. Tyson believed the head was being used as a weapon. His camp believed the same. From Tyson's point of view, this was not just rough fighting. It was a tactic designed to damage him, blind him, frustrate him, and take away the clean punching rhythm that had built his entire career. Whether every clash was intentional or not, the effect was real. Tyson's vision was affected. His rhythm became broken. His anger began rising. Holyfield kept working, kept crowding, kept forcing Tyson to fight uncomfortable minutes. And Tyson could not find the explosive finish everyone expected. Round after round, Holyfield made Tyson look trapped. The famous Tyson entries were jammed. The hooks had less room. The combinations were interrupted by clinches, shoulders, forearms, and close-range pressure. By the 11th round, Tyson was fading, hurt, and overwhelmed. Holyfield poured on combinations along the ropes, and the referee stepped in to stop the fight.
Evander Holyfield. Holyfield continues to dig in. A left hook to the head. He's got Tyson in trouble. Tyson's ready to go. A straight right hand. The top and stops the fight. And Holyfield has...
Tyson had been stopped by TKO. For Holyfield, it was one of the greatest victories of his career. For Tyson, it was humiliation. He did not only feel beaten, he felt cheated by a style he believed lived on the edge of the rules. To him, the loss was not just about punches. It was about being tied up, roughed up, headbutted, cut, ignored, and then stopped in front of the world. That anger became the fuel for the rematch. And for Don King in the boxing business, anger was money. A wounded Tyson was still the most profitable storm in the sport. The first fight had created controversy, shock, and unfinished business. The public wanted revenge. The promoters wanted the rematch. The entire boxing world wanted to know whether Tyson would come back with discipline and destroy Holyfield, or whether Holyfield had truly solved him. 7 months later, the rematch landed in Las Vegas as one of the richest and most anticipated fights in heavyweight history. Tyson's purse was reported at $30 million. Holyfield's was reported at $35 million. By then, this was no longer just a title fight. It was revenge, business, spectacle, and resentment, all packed into one ring. Everyone expected violence. Nobody expected what actually happened.
By Tyson.
Mike's looking to duck and keep his leverage low.
Mills Lane jumping in there. In the first fight, it was Tyson. Left jab, looking to set up the right. Comes Tyson with a left hook to the head of Holyfield.
At the start of the rematch, Tyson looked sharp, tense, and angry. He came out with real urgency. His head movement was active, his feet were alive, and his body language made it clear that he wanted to erase the first fight as quickly as possible. But Holyfield was still Holyfield. He was calm, strong, experienced, and completely comfortable making the fight ugly. He stepped in, tied Tyson up, leaned on him, and looked to turn every exchange into a physical battle. That was the problem for Tyson. The more the fight moved inside, the more the first fight seemed to return. Every clinch felt like the first fight. Every shoulder, every head movement, every rough exchange felt like another warning that the same pattern was beginning again. Tyson complained about head contact. The referee, Mills Lane, saw the action as part of a rough heavyweight fight. To Tyson, that silence felt like betrayal. He believed Holyfield was crossing the line again, and he believed no one in authority was willing to stop it. In the second round, the situation became worse.
Taking charge. Over the top.
Mike throwing a nice right hand, but you see he's not following up with the big combination.
And Tyson really beginning to look frustrated now.
Holyfield moved inside, and a clash of heads opened a cut above Tyson's right eye. The referee ruled it accidental. Tyson was furious. He had already lived through this in the first fight. Now, in the rematch, the same wound was being touched again, the same complaint was being ignored again, and the same opponent was getting away with the same kind of rough contact in Tyson's mind. This is where the fight became psychological. Tyson was not only dealing with physical pain, he was dealing with the feeling that the rules were not protecting him. He was dealing with the memory of the first fight. He was dealing with the pressure of a $30 million revenge match, and he was dealing with an opponent who understood how emotional Tyson could become once he felt wronged. Tyson protested. He pointed to the cut. He complained about the head, but nothing changed. Holyfield remained composed. Tyson became more agitated. Between rounds, the difference between the two men was obvious. Holyfield looked calm. Tyson looked like a man boiling under the surface. By the time the third round began, one strange detail already hinted that Tyson was no longer fully under control. Tyson came out for the third round without his mouthpiece. Mills Lane had to send him back to put it in. It was a small moment, but in hindsight, it feels like a warning sign. Tyson was not entering the round like a controlled professional looking only for a boxing solution. He was entering it like a man who had already started to detach from the rules of the sport. Then, late in the third round, the moment that defined the fight arrived. Holyfield moved into close range. Tyson believed the head came in again. And this time, he stopped waiting for the referee, stopped complaining, stopped trying to win the argument through the official channels of boxing.
What happened here?
He got bit, I think.
Evander Holyfield, look out, he's pushed right here.
Tyson leaned in and bit Holyfield's right ear. For 1 second, the entire arena seemed unable to understand what it had just seen. Holyfield jumped in pain. Blood appeared. The referee stopped the action. The crowd erupted in confusion. The most famous heavyweight in the world had just turned a championship fight into a scene no one could process. It was not a punch. It was not a foul hidden in a clinch. It was not a borderline tactic. It was a direct, visible, shocking violation of everything professional boxing is supposed to be. But even then, the fight was not immediately over. Tyson was penalized, but the bout was allowed to continue, and that decision created the next disaster.
Judge here.
major controversy here in round 3. Field now. A left hook.
You know, it's funny, Mike was having his best
He
friend.
did it again. He did it again. Mike Tyson has bit Evander Holyfield.
When they resumed, Tyson was no longer fighting in a normal emotional state. Holyfield tried to continue. The clinches came again. The chaos remained. And Tyson bit again, this time on Holyfield's other ear. That was the end. Mills Lane disqualified Tyson in the 3rd round. The ring descended into chaos. Security flooded the area. Corners, officials, police, and television crews all tried to make sense of a scene that had escaped the control of sport. In those few minutes, Tyson bit Holyfield's ears, but he also bit into his own legacy. The punishment came quickly. Tyson was fined $3 million, and the Nevada State Athletic Commission revoked his boxing license. Public opinion turned brutally against him. To millions of people, there was no need for context. They had seen enough. Tyson was the villain. Holyfield was the victim. The image was stronger than the explanation. And under the rules of boxing, Tyson had no clean defense. He had broken the rules in the most obvious way possible. But the controversy never completely disappeared, because the headbutt question never disappeared. Years later, fans continued to argue about Holyfield's style. Was he a brilliant inside fighter who knew how to use his head position, shoulders, clinch strength, and veteran craft? Or did he cross the line too often, using head clashes as a hidden weapon against aggressive punchers? The Hassan Rahman fight gave those arguments new life.
Federation, Nummer 1 ist Chris Bird. Ja, hinterher, das ist wieder so, diese Holyfield am Boden. Jetzt kommt wieder Holyfield. Da oben an die Beule. Ja, mit dem kalten Eisen. Riesenbeule. Schaut euch das an.
Against Rahman, Holyfield was involved in another head clash that produced one of the most shocking swellings ever seen in a major heavyweight fight. Rahman developed a massive hematoma on his forehead. The fight was stopped in the 8th round, and Holyfield won by technical decision because he was ahead on the scorecards. For critics of Holyfield, that image became evidence. They argued that Tyson had not imagined everything. They said the head had always been part of Holyfield's rough inside style. For Holyfield's defenders, the answer was different. They saw a tough, physical fighter who fought inside, used legal pressure, accepted rough exchanges, and sometimes had accidental head clashes because of his aggressive style and body position. The uncomfortable truth is that boxing has always lived partly in that gray area. Clinching, leaning, framing, shoulder pressure, head position, forearm control. Veterans use these tools all the time. Some are legal, some are illegal. Many happen too quickly for the referee to judge perfectly in real time. Holyfield was a master of that gray area. He understood how to make a fight uncomfortable. He understood how to take away an opponent's best weapon. He understood how to make Tyson fight emotionally instead of strategically. And Tyson, for all his frightening power, was always vulnerable in one place, his mind. That is what makes the bite fight so tragic. Tyson's act was wrong, but it did not come from an empty place. It came from anger, pressure, old wounds, a collapsing mental state, and the belief that the normal rules had already failed him. The world remembered the bite. The world remembered the missing piece of ear. The world remembered the disqualification, the fine, and the revoked license. But fewer people remembered the buildup. The first fight, the cut, the complaints, the clinches, the head clashes, and the emotional trap that had been closing around Tyson long before the 3rd round of the rematch. And yet, somehow, the story did not end in hatred. Years later, Tyson and Holyfield found a way to make peace with the ugliest moment of their careers. The anger faded. The two men appeared together, joked about the incident, and turned one of boxing's darkest images into something almost strangely human. Tyson eventually spoke with humility about the past. Holyfield, instead of carrying bitterness forever, learned to laugh at the wound that had once defined the rivalry. At one point, Holyfield even joked publicly about barbecue sauce being good enough to make someone want to bite an ear, turning the most infamous injury in boxing into a punchline only he and Tyson could truly own. That is the part of the story people often miss. The bite fight began as blood, rage, and disgrace, but over time, it became a strange symbol of forgiveness. Holyfield's ear remained permanently marked. Tyson's legacy remained permanently complicated. But both men eventually proved that even the ugliest chapters can be revisited with age, humor, and a kind of peace that younger fighters often cannot understand. The ear bite will always be one of the most shocking fouls in boxing history. It marked the collapse of Tyson's discipline, the peak of his frustration, and the moment his public image changed forever. But it also reveals something deeper about boxing itself. The sport is not only punches and scorecards, It is pressure, fear, ego, money, rules, loopholes, and men trying to survive inside all of it. So what do you think? Was Mike Tyson simply a fighter who lost control and crossed an unforgivable line? Or was he a tragic champion pushed into madness by rough tactics, ignored complaints, and a referee who could not calm the storm before it exploded? And what about Evander Holyfield? Was his inside fighting the craft of a great veteran, or was it a ruthless use of the gray areas that boxing never fully knows how to police? Leave your take in the comments. Subscribe to Fight Epoch for more boxing documentaries, fight breakdowns, and stories behind the most misunderstood moments in combat sports. Like the video, share it with a boxing fan, and we will see you in the next one.